Welcome to Programs That Work, Planning for Impact and Success. I am going to be your trainer today. My name is Chelsi Conaway, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Human Services Alliance of Greater Prince William. I am also a nationally certified results-oriented management and accountability trainer. And so ROMA is a process that we're going to talk about today. And some of the really cool things that the ROMA process allows you to do is learn how to plan really cool programs. So that's what we're going to get into in our time together. During this training, you're going to learn about what the program planning and development process looks like from start to finish. This is a higher level overview in some ways. So we do have additional sessions that you can go on our YouTube channel to learn more about, where we'll do a deeper dive on some of those, especially community outreach and engagement, also evaluating the success of your programs. So if you have any questions and you think that, oh my gosh, this isn't as detailed as I was hoping, it might be because there's another training that accompanies this one that can go a little deeper for you. But so we're going to go over what this process looks like from start to finish. We're also going to go over how you can conduct strategic planning with intention, and then some different methods that you can use. So just a quick overview of the Human Services Alliance of Greater Prince William. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are an association of human services providers in the Greater Prince William community here in Northern Virginia. And so what that looks like is providing access to training and networking events, and we make grants, and we help with different forms of communication and all sorts of really cool things. And so this is just one service that we have. And so now let's get into why you're here, the program planning process. With the program planning process, there are 5 main steps, and those are assessment, planning, implementation, achievement of results, and evaluation. What you might notice that it starts with assessment and then it goes in a circle that never really ends, because once you have worked through all the steps and you get down to evaluation, you start with assessment all over again. So it's a cycle. That's why we call it the ROMA cycle, because it's a cycle that never ends. You just start all over again, which is pretty cool. But so today we are in this part of the cycle, planning. And that is when you use your agency's mission statement and data to identify results and strategies. And so let's go into this first step of assessment. Assessment, also known as a needs assessment, it's just a systematic way for you to identify what the needs are of your community or your target population, or to identify what resources already exist. And I shouldn't say or, I really should say and, because you are going to be identifying both whenever it is that you would do a needs assessment. And so this process helps you to identify with some of the causes of why your folks might be struggling, your different program participants might be having hardship, as well as what are the conditions and issues within a community that might be contributing to those causes. Something else that you want to think about when you're doing a needs assessment and going through that process is that there are already probably some existing resources that could be utilized to help empower the families and individuals that you work with. So the purpose of your needs assessment is to, really see what it is that you would like to do, what you need to be addressing, and then that can help you to make sure that you're actually focusing your resources to target the population that you hope to be targeting and to address the different community issues that you hope to address. And also that you are going to be avoiding duplication of services and efforts, and that you're not going to be wasting your resources. So here are some of the steps of doing an assessment. You want to collect existing research and information, both quantitative and qualitative, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then you also want to identify stakeholders and define research methodologies. So how you're going to research, decide what research tools you're going to use. You want to conduct a SWOT analysis, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And again, we'll look at that a little bit more. And then you want to review your vision, mission, and values. So you also want to be doing all of this within the context of what it is that you value at your organization and with your program. And then again, you want to research some more research methods, and then you're going to choose which ones you're going to use. So as it pertains to collecting existing research and information, you can look at summary data from other needs assessments. Maybe you've done a needs assessment or a strategic planning process in the past within your organization. You can look to see what is in your organization-wide budget. That can help to inform what might have been priorities for your organization in the past, for your agency in the past. Yeah, and then also maybe where you might need to develop that area. If you see that maybe what you'd like to work on is underrepresented within your budget, you can look at what the output and outcome data is from your programs and your services. One thing about output is that is the activity that you perform to get a certain result. So an output would be if you had a tabling event in which you were promoting your services, or maybe an upcoming class that you wanted to do or a workshop that you wanted to facilitate. And then the outcome data would be how many people actually came and benefited from that program or service. So you can look at all of that to see how many people did you actually serve? What information could you determine from the people that you actually served? If you collected good data, you can look to see what the demographic information is of folks who you were serving, as well as what some of the outcomes were after they participated in your program and after they had an intervention with you. So you can look at all of those things. You can look at different customer satisfaction reports, or if you had folks do surveys after they came to your organization for help. Anything like that, all of that can be information and research that you collect, as well as more traditional forms of research. So if you're thinking about an industry journal or a report that maybe a local foundation or a hospital in your area might have made about the different social determinants of health, all of those are really cool reports that can help you as you are assessing what the needs are in your community, and then maybe what resources are there to help meet those needs. So the next thing that we said when you are going through your strategic planning steps and doing a community needs assessment is that you would identify your stakeholders and define research methodologies. And listed are some of the different stakeholders that you may have. So internally, your board of directors, the people who work with you in the various different departments that they work in, your volunteers, your donors, all that, your facilities, the people who run the building that you're in. All of those are people that you need to be speaking with about the work that you do. Externally, your key partners, your funders, other service providers, public agencies. So maybe there is a government agency that does similar work or that serves a similar demographic to your clientele. You need to speak with all of those folks, the faith community, the private sector. If you have a program that does something like employment, it would be really important for you to know what employers are looking for, right? So these are all things that you want to take into consideration when you are trying to ascertain who your stakeholders are, and you're trying to define how you're going to conduct research for that. So here is something that you always want to consider whenever you're planning any assessment activity, and that is that we really rely on the engagement with our communities and with our clientele to inform our work and to help us deliver our services to the best of our ability. And so the most impactful programs are the ones that have maximum feasible participation. That means as many different people from as many different diverse backgrounds and different sectors and different stakeholders as you can get involved in your assessment process, the better your process will be. So we mentioned that you want to collect quantitative data. So what does that mean? When you hear the word quantitative data, think back to school, and that just means anything related to numbers, numeric data that you can use and that you can review and that you can, just check out as it pertains to your service area. So there are maps and things that show statistics and charts and graphs and what the numbers are about the people who live in your service area. And so here are some examples about households of people that might live below the poverty level, people, what types of jobs folks have, what type of money they might be earning, all of that kind of stuff you can find from places like the census, different reports that other groups, your local government might have, for instance, if you have a council of government, your employment bureau, all kind of stuff. You can find this data if you just start running a search for it. All you have to do to go to Google and say, type in, I would like to know the poverty level for Prince William County residents, or for people in Manassas Park who live in this zip code, or whatever the case might be. And one thing about data is that to be useful, it must be analyzed. So you have to know how these different data points interconnect. So just because, you can walk out of your front door and observe something doesn't necessarily mean that that picture that you see is telling the full story. So what you want to make sure that you do is look to see, okay, I see that there's a high poverty level in this particular community. What's the employment level in this particular community? What's the education level in this particular community? How might those things be related? It's easy to make the conclusion that because there is a low education level in a community, that will result in there being low employment or low viable employment, in which people are able to earn a living wage. And that might result in, people being in poverty more often than if they were to live someplace else or have a different, educational level. But just because those are conclusions you might reasonably be able to draw, you need to make sure that you still analyze the data that supports those conclusions, because it might be due to something else entirely that you just haven't taken account of. So if you want to think about what's going on geographically, which you can look at by different types of mapping, and then you also want to look at what's going on socially. So what's happening in a community that might make it where those individuals who live there may have access, more or less access, to different resources that could help. The other thing you want to do is look at qualitative data. So when you think of qualitative, think of the L in qualitative, and think about that in terms of telling a story. When you think of quantitative, think of the N in quantitative, and think about that in terms of numbers. With qualitative, what is the story behind that? So like we said, you have to look at all these different factors. So things like open-ended survey questions for the people who live in a target community that you're looking to serve, having interviews, having forums, having focus groups. All of those are ways that you can collect qualitative data that is relevant to the information that you're seeking to find out. And so here are some different pictures of what a focus group might look like, what it might look like to be conducting interviews with key stakeholders. And that can be one-on-one, that can be in a small group, that can be in a larger group. And so what I will do is go ahead and schedule a training on how to properly administer focus group. And then I will mail that invitation out to you all once it's on our calendar. So something else to think about as it pertains to qualitative data is that it's helpful to ask your program participants, whether current or potential or former program participants, to identify their needs and the resources that they think would help them to address their issues. So that seems really obvious. But one thing that I've often found in human services work and other types of nonprofit work and other types of work in which we're trying to create some type of community change is that a lot of times people are over surveyed and under listened to. So once they tell you what their needs are, what they think their own individual needs are as, an individual, a household, a family, and then you want to ask them, what do they think the community's needs are? Because sometimes when folks are filling out surveys and they're responding to interview questions or they're in a focus group, unless you help them to vocalize and really identify what type of data they're providing you with, they might only tell you about what's going on with their individual, their immediate family, and not tell you what's going on with their extended family. Or they might say, I'll tell you all about what's going on with my extended family and not tell you what's going on with my own family. So it's really important that you help them focus on, their neighborhood, the people who go to their church, the people who go to their school, what's going on with their community at large, as well as what's going on under their own roof. And then once again, when they tell you their needs, it's super important that you listen and that you cater your programming based on what it is those program participants told you. Not what you may have heard about them, not what someone who doesn't live in the neighborhood might have said about them. What they tell you they need is what you should respond to, because ultimately that's going to dictate how successful or unsuccessful your program is. So we said that you want to make sure that you conduct a SWOT analysis. So when you complete a SWOT analysis, you want to do that with those stakeholders that you identified. And here are some of the questions that you can ask them. You can ask them, what are some weaknesses, areas for improvement? What has their experience been when interacting with your team? Do they have feedback in general that they would want for you all to consider while you're planning your work? And you want to do that with both your internal and your external stakeholders. And so it's not even just necessarily what does the public think about the work that we're doing, but what does our staff think about the work that we're doing? What are some strengths that they've identified? What are some opportunities that they think we might be able to take advantage of? And then what are some, some weaknesses that we have that we need to work on, or some threats that they might see coming? So those are questions that the people who work very closely with your program might be able to answer for you, as well as the people who are going to be benefiting from it. So sometimes if you're talking to a stakeholder externally who might potentially be a program participant one day, or maybe they've come through the program at some point, they have feedback to give you that's really valuable too, as the individuals who are going to benefit or not benefit from your work. So as you are conducting your SWOT analysis, you want to consider these factors, all of these factors. And we will send you this slide. You don't have to try to write all of this down. We'll send you this recording as well, so it's not something that you have to try to dictate what I'm saying. But these are just all the different factors that you want to consider when you're doing your SWOT analysis. You want to look and see what's going on with your inputs, your outcomes, how your organization is structured, who your partners are, what some of your activities are, what some of the trends are economically, what's going on politically, because all of these things could impact the well-being of not only your organization, but your program specifically, and how it might be funded, or how it might be able to access or not access funding. What's going on legally or environmentally when you're thinking about what's happening in the community that could potentially, really harm some of your program participants or really help them. And then two, what's going on socially and even with technology. So sometimes, there are social trends and there are trends culturally that could have a really big impact in terms of the success of your program and how it's able to help the families and the individuals that you work with. So then while you're going through that, you also want to make sure that you review your vision, mission, and values. And so, it's really important for you to know what it is that you set out to do in the first place. What is your overall organization's mission? What are the primary needs of the people that you are looking to serve? And is that still what you plan to do? Sometimes mission changes over time. It's not supposed to, but it does. And so if it's a conscious change to your mission, then you need to know that as you are going about planning new events. Maybe you've had a change to your mission and your mission is starting to drift into a territory that you did not intend for it to, and you can correct that with the programs that you're planning to kind of right the ship and get it back on the right track. So these are just some questions that you want to think about. What is it that you value as an organization? What do you believe in? How do you want to treat people? How do you show what your attitudes and values are in your daily work and in how you're going to do your program? And what is your vision after you've done your work? What is your vision for your community? After they have had contact with you, how do you want them to feel? And what will success look like for you? And with all of this, is this something that is brief? Is it easy to communicate? Is it concise? And then is it something that the other members in your community actually believe in? So once you've determined these things, do you have the buy-in and support of other people in your community? This is just some food for thought. So now, once you've gone through all of that, you want to choose your research methods. And so your research methods are going to have to be specific to your organization, to your program, to the community issue that you're looking to address. So we're not going to get into what all of those different research methods could potentially be because they are as varied as all of your organizations are. They are going to vary even from program to program within your organization, within your agency. So all that you have to make sure that you do is choose what that research method is going to look like. Does it look like you teaming up with a university to conduct a study? Does it look like you conducting surveys outside of a clinic? Are you going to be outside of a grocery store? Are you going to go door to door and ask people what their needs are? There is no shortage of ways that you can conduct research. And all of that research is valid because it's data collection. And that's really all that research is. Does it look like you reading a book about it from an expert or consulting a subject matter expert? There are infinite ways to conduct this research. It's just important that you choose what your method will be and then that you stick to that. So now we're going to get into the planning section of our ROMA cycle. When you are starting to plan a program, the first things that you want to ask yourself are, what is it that you are looking to change? What are you going to try to change? And so when we ask that question, it seems really simple what the answer might be, but I want you to dig a little bit deeper and think about the fish analogy. So we've always heard this parable, I guess, that I don't know if it's a parable or a saying or analogy or what, but if you teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you'll feed him for a lifetime. But going beyond that, if you prime the pond, you'll make it so that there are fish for him to catch. So when you're thinking about what types of goals, you have in terms of what you'd like to change about your community, when you've identified an issue and assessed that there is a need, think about what type of goal do you want to have? Do you want to have a goal that is on the individual or family level where it's impacting, one person or a small group of people that maybe all live under the same roof? Do you want to impact the community as a whole? So maybe you're saying, we don't need to have, literacy training for one person or financial literacy training for a family, but it would be really great if we had a whole community center for this community where we've identified that that's a need. Okay, so then that's a community level goal. Or is it an organizational level goal? So maybe what you're saying is, we really don't need to have a goal for one individual or one family or for this community, this neighborhood. We need as an organization to have a goal that we are going to revamp the way that we have, our intake, or we're going to revamp the way that we do case management. If that's an organization level goal, you can have a program that's solely structured around the changes you want to make to yourself within that organization and how your organization proceeds, what type of policies you have, how it conducts its business, all of those different things. So when you're thinking about planning your programs, just think about the fish and the fisherman and the pond. And so also when you are thinking about what it is that you're trying to change, start with the end in mind. That means project yourself on the other side of your work, if you can, use your imagination and think about what it is you're trying to change long-term. What will your community look like after you've done your work and after you've intervened and made whatever changes you plan to make? Have you taken into account the full range of community and family needs and other resources in the community? So when you're thinking about, what you want to do and how you want to proceed, have you looked around to see what is already in existence? One issue that a lot of folks will find as they go to plan programs is that there are really already a lot of different programs in existence in any given community. There are very few communities that only have one nonprofit or one faith-based group or one government agency that is trying to tackle a problem. In most communities, there are several. So then you have to think about, is your role creating something that does, that work a little bit differently, or maybe that is serving an underserved population, or that is providing some type of service or some aspect of that service to people who have been unable to access it previously? Or does your work need to look like you connecting people to existing resources? So it's just kind of food for thought. Sometimes it's not so much that you have to create a program that's going to recreate a wheel, so much as just direct people to what other programs are already in existence. And when you're thinking about what it is that you want to change and what type of program you'd like to create, it's really important to not just think about what you've always done, what you've always focused on, what types of community needs you've always addressed. And this is especially for those groups that maybe have been established for a while and have been at this, for quite some time. Think about what needs to be strengthened and what needs to be done, and even what needs to be abandoned. You can do something for a really long time and be doing it wrong, or be doing it in a way that is not the most beneficial for your community and for your program participants. And sometimes when you're looking out your outputs versus your outcomes, what your activities are versus what the results are that you're getting, you might see it is not the most beneficial thing for you to continue doing things how you've always done them. So it's really important that when you're writing grants based on what your community needs assessment says, as you're planning your fundraisers, you're not just seeking funding, and you're not just seeking to perpetuate what you've always done because you've always done it. If you've always done something the same way and you find that it's always worked, there's nothing wrong with that. Keep up the good work. If you find that you've always done something the same way and it's not quite working how you would like for it to work, then embrace that change and doing it a different way next time. So something else that you want to think about is what your role is as a service provider. And so there are kind of two different models that I want you to consider during our time together today. And that is the provision of services model and the strategic thinking model. So with the provision of services model, organizations that are organized to meet specific short-term services, an example of that might be an emergency service like emergency rent, putting somebody in like an extended stay hotel for a while, or providing them with transportation. They might be able to serve a lot of different people. A lot of people need things like food. People need things like utility assistance. We all need those things. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and what we all need to survive, those are all things we need to survive. So the challenge is being able to identify long-term change in your program participants' lives if that's the service model that you have. If it is your service model that you provide clothing to people, or that you are providing somebody with a bus pass, maybe a bus pass, we need those organizations. It's so important that we have groups that can help out when folks get in a pinch. We saw firsthand through the course of this pandemic how quickly people's economic well-being can just turn on a dime. And we will need these. And people who maybe have never needed these types of services before will be forced to go and seek this help out. The work that you do, if you are doing work within the provision of services model, is really, really important and super important. And while you're doing that, something that you want to think about is how you can help those folks long term. That's a challenge that you have when you do that type of service model. Something else that you have to think about is providing services only because funding is available can distract you from a more effective selection of services and strategies. So like I said, it's something that depending on what's going on in your community, what's going on around the world, what the emergent needs are at any given time, it might be something where there's a lot of money that pours into a community. And when you look at your needs assessment, you might see where, yeah, maybe this could benefit the people that you work with. And so if you are going to pursue that type of funding, just make sure you don't get distracted from what your ultimate goal is, which is to provide a long-term change in your folks' lives. So food for thought for those of you who would do a provision of services model. For those of you all who are planning programs that fit with a strategic thinking model, That is the development of comprehensive strategies that must include an understanding of the power of bundling services rather than providing services that meet an isolated need. So bundling services is the concept that if someone is coming to your organization because they are experiencing food insecurity, they're hungry, they don't have enough food, and maybe you have a food pantry. In the provision of services model, you're going to give them a box of canned goods and you're going to send them on their way. That whole transaction might just take a couple of minutes for you to do that. In the strategic thinking model, you are challenged with having to combine that service that addresses that short-term immediate need to help them achieve a longer-term solution to a need that they might have. So what that might look like is when somebody comes to your food pantry, you're going to give them that box of food because that's what they need to get through the day, to get through the week. But you also are going to want to make sure that you connect them with an employment service if they're experiencing unemployment, or that you might connect them with someone that could do mental health counseling. If maybe the reason why they're experiencing unemployment is due to a mental health issue. What are their other unmet needs, and how can you bundle what it is your physical, short-term, immediate solution is alongside what that longer-term need is, so that ultimately over time, because of their intervention and because of that interaction that they had with your organization, they won't need to come in for that short-term service. If you can connect someone who's experiencing food insecurity with a job, a training program, an education where they can have a higher living wage, that might make it where they don't need to come in anymore because they won't be experiencing food insecurity if they can earn higher wages. So that's just a thought about, if you're going to bundle services versus if you're just doing a short-term service, all the different things that you have to take into consideration when you're planning your program. How are you addressing both of these? Because now if you just have an employment program, or if you just have a financial literacy program and there is no short-term benefit to someone coming, a lot of people are not going to invest in that longer term intervention, even though it's going to be really helpful for their household, for their family, for their own personal benefit. Those things can be really overwhelming for people. And that can be something that, it's hard to see 20 years down the road how going through a program can help them. So you have to help them in the short term so that they'll be invested enough in your program to stick it through for the long term. So when you're thinking again about your provision of services model, you want to think about the fact that a failure to link activities together to form a comprehensive set of services and advocacy strategies may reduce your effectiveness in assisting your program participants. And there are oftentimes unintended consequences to doing the same services that you have always done in the same way. And so that might be that you are actually becoming an enabler and that you are enabling the continuation of the problem. We know that no one seeks to become an enabler and that no one is out here trying to find ways to not have meaningful change. But that's something that can happen when you don't link a short-term intervention with a longer-term benefit. So you always want to be thinking about that when you're planning your programs. Something else you want to think about for those of you all who are going to be doing the strategic thinking model as you are planning your programs, is that in addition to providing direct services, organizations must explore the impact of creating community engagement strategies, advocacy, and policy change strategies, and other activities that are focused on reducing the problem and its causes. And so in order to do that, you're going to have to strengthen partnerships. And so you can see that, especially since 2020, we've had quite a bit of change going on in the world in a bunch of different ways and in a bunch of different areas of our lives. And that works through advocacy and changing policies. And if you identify that there is an issue, not only addressing it on a one-on-one level with the program participant, addressing it as an organization, addressing it within a community, you might also have to address it way at the top. So sometimes the issues that our different individuals and our different families are going through are directly related to legislation that was passed or legislation that was not passed. And so once you start thinking big picture and long term, that might even mean that your program is going to have to get involved with something like advocating, trying to influence legislation, and all the ways that it is legal for a nonprofit to do so. So something else that you want to think about when you are contemplating your program is that you want to make SMART goals. So specific, significant, stretching goals, and goals that are measurable, meaningful, and motivational, and goals that are agreed upon, achievable, and action-oriented, as well as goals that are realistic, reasonable, and rewarding. Also time-based, time-bound, tangible, and trackable. That is what this acronym SMART means. And so with that, it's just make sure your goals meet all of these criteria. And so we're going to look at what that looks like in the form of this after-school program. So if the mission of the after-school program is to provide support to the families of ultimate middle schools, increase academic excellence in tutorials, mentorships, and partnerships, that is a really great mission. And if the vision is for all ultimate middle school students to achieve their highest academic expectations and focus on their career path, that is a really great vision. But now what does that mean in terms of a SMART goal? A SMART goal for the ultimate after-school program might say something like 80% of the children enrolled in the after-school program will read on grade level before the end of the third quarter. That's really, really specific, and it's measurable, and it's attainable. And it's something that's result-oriented, and it's time-based. You know, by the end of the third quarter, we're saying 80%. We're saying what we expect for the increase in their performance to be. And so you want to give all of your goals for SMART tests. So that acronym that we have, is it a SMART goal? Every goal that you're going to create for your program, see if it passes the test. So something else that you want to think about when you are planning is, what is your plan actually going to be? We've talked about planning in more conceptual terms. Now let's talk about it in terms of you actually sitting down, writing out a plan. Who, what, when, where, why, and how much. When you are planning any type of event, any type of program, any type of project, those are really super key aspects that you're going to have to know. And so you have to do this for each aspect of your plan. So for instance, let me come back here really quickly. For instance, the who is going to be, who's going to benefit from your plan? Who is going to be administering your project? Who is going to be evaluating your project? And who are you going to report to? All of those can be your who. What is it that you're going to do? What is it that you hope to achieve? What is it that you are trying to address? Where are you going to physically execute your plan, your project, your program? Do you have a space? Do you need to rent a space? Do you need to partner with somebody to have a space for your program? Where is your service area going to be? Where is your target, outcome sphere? Are you hoping to only impact people in a certain neighborhood, in a certain zip code, in a certain state, in one country? What does that look like? What you mean? When do you hope to do this? And not only when, in terms of when do you hope to execute your program? When do you hope to launch it? When do you hope to start seeing results? When do you hope to be able to start evaluating those results? When do you plan to relaunch it if you need to relaunch it? What's your when? And why are you doing it? Like we said, it's got to align with your mission, vision, and values. It's got to align back to what it is that you're hoping to address on, a larger scale in terms of what your community needs. And then how much is it going to cost for you to launch this, to maintain this? Is your program sustainable? If it's not, how much money do you have to raise to get from where you are to where you would like to be? How much in terms of what you have to obligate now versus what you're going to need to obligate, just what and how much. And you want to do this for each aspect of your plan. And so something else that you want to do is know your rate of success. So you will not be able to manage what you cannot measure. So your organization will be tracking how many people's lives have been changed and how communities have been improved. And so it's going to be really important for you to know if the outcomes that you've achieved are actually good or not. I mean, of course, they're helpful, they're changing lives, and that's beautiful. But have you actually met what your goals were? So let's look at the sport of baseball as an example of tracking success. So anytime you're thinking about baseball, you're thinking about, baseball players, different teams you like, different games you like. You have in your mind what a successful baseball player looks like, and you might even know what their batting average is. So if a team has batters, and you have an average of, 300, then they know they're going to win games because that's a really good batting average. Baseball players have been keeping their statistics forever, like well over 100 years. And so they know that if a player hits the ball and gets on the base 1 out of 3 times at bat, the overall performance will mean winning games. So when you're thinking about your program, think about it through the lens of baseball. What's good? How many outputs are you going to have? How many activities are you going to have before you have what you consider a success? Think about what a good performance indicator looks like. So, is it that you want to have so many people come to an open house night that you're having at your organization? Okay, once they come, then what? Was just getting there the outcome? Was it that you just wanted them to leave their house and come to your space and then participate in whatever activity you had that night? Is it that you're hoping to recruit them to participate in some type of longer term program? What is it that you were actually even engaging in terms of performance? And then what types of records are you keeping? Make sure that you're keeping, sign-in sheets, that you're keeping attendance, that you're checking to see how many people are actually engaging with you. What does that mean? What does that look like? And then you want to develop a benchmark of excellence. So maybe you've had a couple of open house nights and you've had a really great turnout. If you don't have a benchmark to know what your goal is long-term, what your ultimate goal is that you hope to achieve, you could have infinite amounts of open houses and not know if you've ever quite reached that goal that you were trying to reach. And then what you want to do is make sure that you publicize what it is that you have learned about your work. So if you had 4 open house nights and you had 400 parents come and learn about parenting skills, you want to make sure that the community knows, hey, we had 400 people come and we were only planning to have 100. So look how we have excelled and exceeded, beyond what we thought might happen. Or it might be, hey, we had 400 people come and we were hoping to get 1,000. So what we got to do is do some more outreach and community engagement to get more people to come to other open houses. Whatever it is, once you know your benchmarks, once you know what your performance indicators are, then you can work towards that and share that with the community so that they can buy in as well. We have got to do this for our programs. All of our programs, all of our projects, all of our work, it really, really does make a difference because what gets measured gets done. So you can predict outcomes by creating what's called a logic model. And this is just an example of a logic model. There are thousands of examples. If you Google them, you can probably find one that is specific to whatever industries you all are in, whatever service sectors that you all are doing. But basically what it's going to do is lay out what the situation is. So what's going on in the community? If it's something where, it's environmental, if it's going on with what's happening civically, legally, socially, economically, what's going on? What's the problem? And then what is the action that has to take place to address this problem? So if it's something like kids are running wild in the streets, and you've identified the needed action is that there need to be more parents who know how to help guide their children to make smart choices. So then what are the learning needs? What are the objectives of that? We know what the issue is. We know what the need is. What are we going to do about it? Is it that we need to create more awareness of issues, create knowledge of things? Do we need to change attitudes that parents might have about, how they manage their children? And then once you do that, how are you going to implement it? You know what you've got to do. How are you going to implement it? Implement your change strategy. Do you have staff? Do you have enough volunteers? Do you have a space to have your training? Is there equipment that you're going to have to project onto the wall? Do you have to rent it? Can you buy it? Can you just go to a library and go there for free? What does that look like? And then what types of activities are you going to have? What are your, what is it that you're actually investing into addressing this issue? Maybe you're going to do one-on-one counseling with families. Maybe you can just do a group training or have a meeting or have a support group. Or maybe you need to have some type of media work and have like a public information campaign with public service announcements. Or maybe you need to develop some type of product that's going to help to occupy parents and their children. It just really depends on whatever activity you decide is going to work best for your group. And then you want to think about who your audience is. So who are the participants? Who needs to be, participating in your programs? Who needs to be promoting your programs to their program participants? Who do your partners need to be? All of that. Who's going to help you with this? Who's your audience? And then when you want to think about what your outcomes are, think about your short-term outcomes. So maybe short-term, that type of outcome might be that you have a certain amount of parents who register for the training. You have a certain amount of people who think, okay, yeah, no, that's good. You put out good work in that public service announcement. What's the short-term objective? And then think about what's a medium-term objective. So maybe you're starting to see a behavior change in the parents who came to your training. Maybe they're practicing the things they learned, or they're making different decisions about how they might discipline their children. Or maybe they're starting to initiate different policies within their household about, when little Johnny and little Susie can be out after dark, and maybe they have a curfew now when they didn't have a curfew before. And then social action, maybe you see that they're starting to galvanize and they're starting to advocate to have more extracurricular activities, or they're looking to have, a community center where they may not have had one before. And then what's the long-term impact of that? If this is the problem that we're seeing socially and, throughout our community, what's the long-term impact of all of this work that you've done? The long-term impact might be something like the kids aren't getting into as much trouble. There's not as much crime. There's not as much injury, any of that. Who knows? Whatever it was you were trying to prevent, is that what your outcome is? Is that what the impact of your work is? What are those indicators? Maybe that indicator might be less incarceration. Who knows? But when you're doing a logic model, you can look at that some more. So just a reminder that, you just want to look at other similar programs in the community that are dealing with certain similar issues that our community might be dealing with, your community might be dealing with, and then see how they handled it. What worked and what didn't work for them. You can oftentimes find different types of performance indicators from similar programs. So see how they report their outcomes. How are they reporting what has changed in their community after their interventions? If we relate it back to baseball, just think about who your fans are. Who are your funders and supporters and staff, and what kind of information do they want to know? What types of outcomes do they want to hear about? So while we're not expected to hit the ball out of the park every time that we're up to bat, we really need to eventually win games. And in our case, as human services providers and as people who run nonprofits and are out here trying to change the world, that looks like helping families and communities to achieve results. And by doing that, we can show our fans that we are worthy of their support. And so here are some best practices for program planning. You want to base your decisions on data, not emotion. Just because you've been doing a program a certain way for 50 years, if the data doesn't support the way you're doing it, you need to figure out a way to change that. You want to make sure that you're engaging your stakeholders, learning from your experience, what works, what didn't. If you tried something one time on a fluke and it worked, how can you recreate that? If you tried something the same way a million times and it's not really working, you don't really have to try it a million and one time to know it's not going to work. It's not going to work anymore. It hasn't been working. Do something else. You have to make hard choices. And sometimes those hard choices in program planning involve you deciding that maybe you can't do what you thought you could do in the way you thought you could do it. Maybe the partners or staff that you have or volunteers that you have are not quite who you need to take you to the next level. Maybe you have to pull out of an office space that you've been in a really long time, or an event space that maybe isn't quite yielding the physical results that you need in terms of being able to accommodate your program participants whenever you're doing something for your program. All of those are hard choices, and those are choices that are very emotional to make, but they're necessary to make. Something else to consider is that you want to get staff ownership. So with staff ownership, you want to have buy-in from your team. If you decide to plan an event and maybe you've consulted the rest of your stakeholders, maybe you haven't. We're telling you you need to. If you have decided that you're going to do that, you then need to make sure that you have fully onboarded your staff and that they're going to be on board with what it is that you plan to do and that they think it's a good idea. So you want to be innovative, you want to be, simple. You don't want to start with something that's too convoluted, a program or a plan that's too convoluted, because what you'll find is that it's really hard for other people to support that, to get on board with that, to know what's going on. In terms of innovation, you don't want to keep recreating the wheel. You don't want to duplicate services. Now, please note there is a difference between duplicating a service and replicating a service. When you duplicate a service, that means that if there is a clothing supply closet on the left side of the street, you have a brilliant idea that one is needed in your community, you haven't properly researched it, so you put one on the right side of the street. That is a duplication of efforts. You're serving the exact same community as the one that was already pre-existing, and it's a waste of your resources. Versus if you replicate what you saw as a successful clothing, supply closet on the north end of town, but you've noticed that there is no similar supply closet on the south end of town. If you put one on the south end of town, even if it does the exact same thing as the one that's on the north end of town, you have replicated that program. And in replicating that program, you are introducing those services and those benefits to an entirely new audience. People who maybe didn't have transportation to get to the other side of town now have access to it because of you. So when you're thinking about being innovative with your program planning, you want to make sure that you think about the folks that are underserved, not being served at all, underrepresented, any of that. And then it's okay if you replicate a service, it's not okay to duplicate one. So now we're going to get into implementation. With implementation, you want to be flexible. You want to take your time and actually think about what adjustments are needed and then make them if they're needed. You want to make sure that you don't drift too far. We talked about mission drift a little bit earlier, but also don't drift too far from your original goals as you're providing services if you find that adjustments are needed. It's important to be flexible in how you get things done. You don't want to be too flexible in the fact that, you still have some objectives you're hoping to achieve and you still have some outcomes that you would like to reach at some point. If that's really important to you and that's what your agency's mission is, and that's what your organization has created a program to do, you should be flexible in your methods, but not in what you hope to achieve. And then you want to check in with your stakeholders regularly. And so regularly is going to be different for all of your different programs. For some people, in some programs, regularly might mean checking in once a year, annually. For others, you might have to check in with your stakeholders twice a week. It just depends, and it's going to see what it is that you're looking to achieve with your folks. That's going to determine whether or not you need to check in them more often or less often. Something else you want to do while you're implementing your programs is take pictures. A lot of times you can collect a whole bunch of data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, but one of the most important aspects of data that is qualitative is picture. A picture can tell you if the people who are sitting in your audience at your event look happy or if they look bored, or were they sweating? Were they hot? Did you have food there? Do they look like they're hungry and irritable? Pictures tell you a lot of things. Okay, so maybe you have an event and you see everybody's bunched up on one side. So when you're planning your program for next time, you'll notice spread them out a little bit more. Pictures are so valuable in helping you to determine who's coming to your activity and what type of experience they're having. And then also what you want to do is make note of anything that you didn't expect to happen that's good or bad. And so once you get into your next step, that is the achievement of results. And so with the achievement of results, you want to think about what it is you're hoping to collect, what type of information you want to collect, and then making sure that everybody in your team knows what it is they're supposed to be gathering. And then give them the tools to track that data. If it's that they need a sign-in sheet, or if they need to do intake forms, or if they need to pass out surveys, make sure everybody has that to be successful. You also want to get reports from the program on a regular basis. So like you said, regular basis is going to vary from organization and program to program. When you compare your action steps with progress towards what you're looking to do and how you're providing services, then you want to also engage in strategies that can support that. And then you want to report your progress to your stakeholders and to the different people who are invested in your well-being. And so now let's get into evaluation. So evaluation is facts, figures, stories, everything that's going to help to provide useful information for what you hope to know about how your program is doing. You cannot neglect evaluation because it helps you to make decisions, learn from the mistakes you might have made. You don't have to make them twice. It'll help you to save resources, find out data that you maybe haven't been tracking that you should be tracking, and then let you know if you're actually meeting any of your goals. So when you're doing that, and we have a separate training, which is why we're kind of going through this a little quickly, we have a separate training that's all about evaluating your programs, and that's called How's It Going? And so you can find a recording of that training on our YouTube channel. You can access our YouTube channel by going to alliancegpw.org. And yeah, you can watch that back. Or you can join another one that we have live. It's like before our mailing list, so you can use it. But these are just a few questions that you want to ask during an evaluation. Did we need additional resources? Did we do what we sought out to do? Did we serve who we planned to serve? And, were there any differences between who we served and who we thought we might serve? What services produce which outcomes? How can we track all of these different results? Who was achieving this? Did they have different demographics information than we maybe thought they would have? And, did anybody achieve multiple outcomes? What data do we want to collect that we didn't collect? And we have all of these questions in checklist form, so I will also send that to you at the conclusion of this training, so you can go through and check this as you're evaluating your program. And then do you want to gather from any data from other people who maybe you didn't think that you needed to get data from? And so once you have gathered this information, you also want to consider the fact that how are you going to report your outcomes? How are you going to share this information with the public at large? Is that going to look like a social media post, an infographic? Are you going to make a report? Are you going to do a video? What are you going to do? So now let's discuss the issues that you submitted specifically. So if I don't have anything in the chat, so I'm going to give you all a moment to put something in the chat. And while you're filling out the chat and submitting any questions that you have, I will tell you about what is to come. What is to come as it pertains to the Alliance is we have on October 12th, so a week from today, we have a training coming up that is how's it going? And that's about evaluating and analyzing your project's well-being, your program's well-being. We referenced that training a little bit earlier, so for those of you all who cannot attend live, you can always go back and watch it on YouTube, but we will be doing that one live, and it's all about how you can really get deep in terms of evaluating your programs, your outcomes, your outputs, what's working, what's not working, all that good stuff. So just food for thought, that's going to be coming up on November the 3rd of 2022. We have what's called our Connecting the Dots conference. That is at the Hilton Performing Arts Center here in Manassas, Virginia. And it is a way for local service providers to learn all about each other. Really, it's about ways that they can learn about each other, can learn about different community resources that are at their disposal, and connect to different things for the individuals that they serve. So that's what is to come. And we have a special offer, which is that you can join the Human Services Alliance of Greater Prince William. We are an association. It is $50 to join for an individual or a family. That's an annual membership due fee. And then we have an annual membership dues and the annual fee to join for an organization, which is $100 annually. So if you all are interested in joining the Alliance, we would love to have you. That's our shameless plug. We have lots of fun things planned for our members. So yeah, the more the merrier. And so I don't see any questions. If you think of any questions, oh, and that's where you can join us and go to our website to learn more about becoming a member. But if you think of any questions, you can connect with us on our website, which is down here, www.alliancegpw.org. And you can email me. Again, my name is Chelsi Conaway. You can check out what we've got going on our social media. Like I said, we're going to add you to our listserv. So if you want to be kept abreast of what all we're doing, then you can just check your inbox. If you don't want to know what we're doing, you can always unsubscribe. We don't judge. But just FYI, what we have going on, we'll always let you know. And so with that, I thank you all for your time. We ended about 25 minutes early, which is great. Did you guys have any questions? So I am giving you back this half hour, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. And if there is anything that we can do for you at the Alliance, then please let us know. Thank you so much. You guys take care.